My name is Carol David. I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Prairie Foundation. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see so many of you. I love seeing the backdrop photos of prairie. And if you've tried Brooke's prairie-inspired drink recipes, let us know. And if you've created your own recipes, let us know. For right now, I'm drinking water. I will refer to it as Prairie Dewdrops for the moment. In a moment, Missouri Prairie Foundation Board President David Young will welcome you to our 2020 virtual annual dinner. Before we hear from David, though, I want to highlight some features of the Zoom meeting so you can make the most of the evening. If your camera is on, you can wave to your friends. You can use the chat box to send a message to your friends or to anyone else in attendance. If you're on a computer, you'll see a reaction button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a phone or tablet, you can click on the three dots to see the symbol for applause if at any point during the evening you'd like to use that. If you'd like to add a prairie backdrop photo, like the beautiful photo I have from MPF Vice President of Science and Management, Bruce Schutte, Missouri Prairie Foundation Director of Administrative Operations, Brooke Widmar, sent you a link in an email, or you can use a photo of your own. A link to instructions are in the chat box and on the website as well. Also, I'd like to remind you that our silent auction is open for bidding through tomorrow, Saturday, August 29th until noon. We're grateful to the many generous and creative people who donated artwork, collectibles, experiences, and other silent auction items. You can find beautiful original paintings, exclusive outdoor outings, a stay at a prairie cottage, outdoor gear, museum passes, and much more. You can get to our silent auction page through a link in the chat feature, and proceeds from the silent auction will help us carry out our award-winning prairie protection work. So thank you for bidding. I'll be your MC this evening from my home office in Jefferson City. Brooke is running the show from her home in Columbia, and I'm very grateful to her for all of her hard work and creative talents in making this evening possible. You can see Missouri Prairie Foundation Director of Prairie Management, Jared Hubner. Maybe you can see him waving from Joplin. And Missouri Prairie Foundation Outreach and Education Coordinator, Felicia Brundick, waving from Pacific, Missouri. And Felicia is working the chat box. And Missouri Prairie Foundation board members are in attendance as well from around the state. Hello, our wonderful and hardworking board members, other volunteers, and there are some technical advisors tuned in tonight as well. This evening, we have much to share with you. We have special messages from conservation celebrities. We will announce our 2020 awardees. We will visit with acclaimed wildlife photographer Napadal Powathong. We'll hear from Missouri Prairie Foundation lifetime member Susan Lordy Marker with an invitation to help protect prairie and establish more prairie plantings. And we have 3 $100 gift cards donated by Bass Pro Shops to give away throughout the evening as door prizes. Felicia is using a name generator app that randomly selects names from the list of attendees this evening for the door prizes. And to kick all of this off, here is Board President David Young from his home in Lee Summit, Missouri, to welcome you.
Good evening. I want to welcome you and thank you for attending our virtual annual dinner. As you can see, I'm a little different this year, and our dinner and planning is a little different also. But we are still planning on having just as much fun. This is our time to celebrate prairie and enjoy the evening. While I miss seeing and talking to everyone in person, I am thrilled that we can still connect virtually. Native prairies and grasslands are important parts of our mission, and you can support our mission by donating and bidding on the items and experiences we have in the silent auction. You can also donate at any time tonight as we go throughout the program. We have a special presentation from MPF member Susan Lordy Marker as she shares about an exciting match opportunity. Enjoy the evening and just continue to bid, bid, bid. Now, let's have some fun. Cheers.
Thank you, David. We're very grateful to our generous virtual annual dinner sponsors, whom I'd like to recognize now here with this slide. The sponsorships of $100 or more from the individuals listed here are very much appreciated. These gifts support the important conservation work we do and have made our evening extra special. Thank you very much, 2020 Annual Dinner sponsors. We also appreciate everyone who sent other donations when registering. We're here this evening because we support the Missouri Prairie Foundation for a pretty straightforward reason. All of us, members and other financial supporters, board members, other volunteers, and staff, we love Prairie, and we know we must all work together to assure its existence into the future. For 54 years, the Missouri Prairie Foundation has been a strong voice for prairie conservation. Our mission is to protect prairie and other native grasslands through land acquisition, prairie management, prairie education, and support of prairie research. We also promote the use of native plants through our Grow Native plant education and marketing program. And this year is a milestone for Grow Native as we recognize the program's 20th anniversary. We'd like to thank our more than 150 Grow Native professional members in 2020 and our 2020 Grow Native sponsors. Grow Native professional memberships and sponsorships provide necessary funds so that we can deliver quality native plant programming. Our educational and marketing activities in turn help drive demand for native seeds, plants, shrubs, trees, and native plant services, which help grow the native plant industry, benefiting all of us. The Missouri Prairie Foundation's land conservation efforts are dedicated exclusively to protecting remnants of an ecosystem that once covered 15 million acres in Missouri, but is now reduced to fewer than 60,000 original scattered acres. Each one of these acres is extremely biodiverse and very rare, and we believe must be protected for the future. We have a special message now from Missouri Prairie Foundation honorary board member and world-renowned conservationist, Dr. Peter H. Raven, on the importance of saving irreplaceable prairie resources.
Hi, folks. Delighted to have you here with us this evening. I'm Peter Raven, used to be president of the Missouri Botanical Garden, and I'm an honorary member of the board of the Missouri Prairie Foundation. I love the Missouri Prairie Foundation for two reasons. First of all, it's the most enthusiastic bunch of volunteers that I know that are devoted to any cause. Happy people cooperating with one another to bring about permanent good for those who come after us. Secondly, because prairies in Missouri are such an integral part of our state, when people came into this state, they saw about a fifth of the state, about 70,000 square miles in prairie. Now, do you know what we have left? You'll never guess. Less than 100 miles of prairie left. And it lasts as both a reminder of the kind of place that our ancestors moved when they began to farm this fertile soil. And it also is a reservoir, a kind of a hideout for the biodiversity in the prairies, which is so rich, wonderful, which our kids and we all enjoy so much, and which should be kept going there perpetually for the good of those who come after us. I'm glad that you're a part of this effort tonight. I hope you'll be a part of this effort in the future. And I want to congratulate Carol Davitt and her fine staff for the efforts that have brought this organization to the level of success and promise that it enjoys this evening. Thanks for joining us. We love your participation now, and we'll like very much to have you joining us in the future. Have a good evening. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Raven, for your support of prairie and for your tireless conservation efforts around the world. We recognize the importance of protecting prairie, and that is why we are very grateful to our generous supporters whose gifts make our work possible. I'd like to recognize our Missouri Prairie Foundation champions and patrons for the past year since last August. This Big Blue Stem Champion category slide was just added 4 days ago when we received a very generous bequest from the trust of Ed Schmidt of St. Louis. Ed was a Missouri Prairie Foundation lifetime member who died last year. Ed's remarkable gift to us will significantly advance our prairie protection efforts. Ed lived a life of learning and service to others. Born in Alton, Illinois, he attended the University of California, Berkeley, and worked his way around the world as a bellhop at a ski resort in Austria, an excavator of Viking graves in Sweden, and as a fruit picker on an Israeli kibbutz. He was a lifetime educator who settled in St. Louis and taught at Ladue High School in St. Louis County for 25 years and in Kenya. His passion centered on aid to schools in East Africa, environmental causes, and social justice. Ed loved prairies and many other aspects of the natural world and was an avid native plant gardener. He made several previous donations to the Missouri Prairie Foundation, including a generous gift that helped pay for our acquisitions of Pleasant Run Creek Prairie and Snowball Hill Prairie. Ed was a very generous soul, and we are honored and humbled by his gift. We are extremely grateful as well for gifts from our Monarch champions. Joan Letzinger, the Edward K. Love Conservation Foundation, and Jim Polson and his sister Judy Polson with a donation of land in this gift category. Our Blazing Star champions, Susan Lordy Marker and Dennis Marker, Rudy and Judy Raceline, the Robert J. Trulask Jr. Family Foundation. Our gold patrons, Dr. Bibi Cronwell, the Holston Family Foundation, Leslie Knowles, and David and Jennifer Urich. And our silver patrons, which include an anonymous donor, Linda and Bob Ballard, Ronald and Suzanne Berry, the Delta Foundation, Jack Harris, Margaret Hollyfield and Maurice Meslins, Anne Rankin Horton and Robert Horton, Jenna Miller, Emily Pulitzer, Terrence Rotterman, Doris and Bob Sherrick, Dorothy and John Stade, and Rick and Karen Tom. Thank you, our champions and patrons over the past year. We are also grateful for gifts from all supporters at all other giving levels and for the many grants and cooperative agreements with state and federal agencies that help us carry out important conservation work on our prairies and on land owned by prairie partners. And we're very pleased to have a new giving opportunity for you this summer, thanks to a generous matching gift from Missouri Prairie Foundation lifetime members Susan Lordy Marker and her husband Dennis to help support our work. Here's a special message from Susan from out on her prairie.
Hello from the prairie. I'm Susan Lordy Marker, and I am a member of Missouri Prairie Foundation. You know, Dennis and I have been so impressed by this organization. Under Carol's leadership, an amazing staff. I mean, their outreach, they are raising the consciousness of more and more people about our precious Missouri prairies and the benefits of native plants. And Jared's teamwork protecting and maintaining prairie habitat that just keeps expanding. But most of all, the volunteers. I mean, they are the best. And that includes the officers, the board, the scientists, the volunteers who show up at every event with their enthusiasm, so willing to share their knowledge. And I love that there's always learning going on. So MPF is a force. And MPF really is most of you. It has been your generosity and support that has inspired Dennis and me to do a challenge match for Prairie. Every dollar donated to MPF, we will match up to $20,000. So we went to raise $40,000 this year. Missouri Prairie Foundation has already accomplished so much, but there's still so much more to do. Let's keep the momentum going.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to see you in your beautiful prairie. We are very grateful for Susan and Dennis's matching gift. As of today, we've raised more than $7,000 toward our $20,000 goal in gifts to be matched by Susan and Dennis up to $20,000 for a total goal of $40,000. We thank these supporters for their gifts to the 2020 marker match opportunity received so far this year. You can make a contribution of any amount to this campaign at any time tonight or after this evening, and Susan and Dennis will match your gift 100%. Felicia has provided a link in the chat box if you'd like to make an online donation. The Missouri Prairie Foundation community has come a long way since it began in 1966. Today, we own and manage more than 3,200 acres of original prairie, as well as some reconstructed acreages in 23 total tracts of land, all open to the public to enjoy and learn from. These prairies provide habitat for dozens of plants and animals of conservation concern and scores of other prairie-dependent species. They are gold mines of soil microbes. They store significant amounts of carbon underground, and they absorb large quantities of stormwater, which protects streams and property. On May 15, 2020, the Missouri Prairie Foundation closed on its most recent purchase, the Ray Letzinger Prairie near Sarcoxie, Missouri. Natural resource damage assessment and restoration funding awarded to the Missouri Prairie Foundation made this prairie acquisition possible. The prairie is named for Mr. Ray Letzinger, whose sister Joan Letzinger purchased naming rights this year to honor her brother, who passed away in 2018. Her generous contribution will support future prairie protection efforts. Ray was a moth expert, and while entomology was not his profession, he collected, identified, and preserved one of the largest collections of moth species in Missouri. Over 47 years, he amassed a collection of 1,436 species and more than 22,000 specimens. His collection has been given to the Enns Entomological Museum at the University of Missouri. Recently, Joan wrote these words to me. Ray was so appreciative of the prairies that I felt purchasing the naming rights to a Missouri Prairie Foundation prairie would be very appropriate. I knew it would make him extremely proud, and it was my way of honoring his legacy. The Ray Letzinger Prairie and every one of our other original prairies is critically important to the survival of prairie-dependent plants and animals like the blue heart's wildflower on the previous slide, as well as many organisms that scientists are still learning about. Dr. Alice Tipton, who has conducted research at the Missouri Prairie Foundation's Schwartz Prairie, has a special message about this to share with you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Alice Tipton, and I'm an assistant professor of biology, formerly at Lincoln University and currently at St. Louis University. I study a special group of fungi called mycorrhizal fungi that live in and on plant root systems and help the plants get things like nutrients and sometimes water that they can't get on their own in exchange for some of the plant's sugar resources. In prairies, these relationships are really important, and some prairie plants can't barely survive at all without their mycorrhizal fungi partners. Missouri Prairie Foundation is important to me because it preserves the remnant prairies that I do my work in. These prairies are important because they contain communities of mycorrhizal fungi that we don't find anywhere else, and we can learn a lot about these relationships in these remnant prairies. Missouri Prairie Foundation is also important to me because it provides a community in which we can talk about scientific research and prairie biology. So thank you, Missouri Prairie Foundation, for all that you do.
Thank you, Dr. Tipton. The study of prairie soil and soil microbes is a vast frontier of new discovery, and we're grateful to Dr. Tipton and other scientists for their work to help us all understand more about these important prairie resources. Felicia is going to put a link in the chat to an article in the Missouri Prairie Journal by Dr. Tipton about prairie mycorrhizal fungi, so you can learn more about this fascinating component of prairies. There are many plants, animals, and fungi that are completely dependent on original prairie. There are others, however, that are grassland dependent. They need open grassland, and while original prairie is extremely important to them, reconstructed or planted prairies provide excellent and much needed habitat for them too, like this Henslow sparrow, this adorable bobwhite quail, and other grassland birds whose populations are declining. Missouri Prairie Foundation member Dr. Mark Robbins is an ornithologist with the University of Kansas Biodiversity Institute and Natural History Museum. Dr. Robbins has a message about grassland birds that Brooke will share with us now.
Hello, my name is Mark Robbins. I'm an ornithologist at the University of Kansas Biodiversity Institute. I've been studying birds for over 50 years in Missouri. Last October, a major study was published that's documented over the past 50 years an estimated net loss of 3 billion birds on the North American continent. The group of birds most heavily impacted are grassland birds. And it's estimated that we've lost 53% of our grassland birds during that 50-year period. It's estimated that a third of Missouri was once covered by tall grass prairie. Today, less than 1% of the tall grass prairie remains in Missouri. That underscores why the Missouri Prairie Foundation is a critical organization, not only for birds, but also all the flora and fauna of our prairies. This is a highly efficient and effective organization. I strongly recommend that everyone continue to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robbins. We are grateful to Dr. Robbins for his work to advance knowledge about grassland bird conservation. Prairies and prairie plantings are important habitat for grassland birds and also many insects, including breeding and migrating monarch butterflies. Tonight, Dr. Chip Taylor, the founder of Monarch Watch, who is a world-renowned expert on butterflies and their migration patterns, has a special message to share.
Hi, I'm Chip Taylor, founder and director of Monarch Watch at the University of Kansas, and a proud member of the Missouri Prairie Foundation, a guardian of our prairie heritage. In case you don't know, only a very small fraction of our original prairies remain. It's estimated to be far less than 4%. Missouri Prairie Foundation owns and manages and restores prairies for the public to enjoy and to maintain this part of our national heritage. This is a wonderful mission. These prairies are reservoirs of biodiversity. They are important sanctuaries for many endangered species and many species that are declining outside of the prairies as well. As you may have heard, insect abundance has been declining sharply in many regions, in some cases due to pesticides, and in others the cause appears to be climate change, but other unknown factors may also be in play. As undisturbed sites, prairies may help us understand the reasons for these changes. The work of the Missouri Prairie Foundation has always been important, but as the climate continues to change, the efforts to maintain and restore these prairies will increase in importance. For these reasons and many, many more, we hope that many hearing this message will step forth and lend your support to the mission of the Missouri Prairie Foundation. It's extremely important. Thank you for listening. Bye now.
We are very grateful for Dr. Taylor's work, and today is a special day for him. It's his birthday. Happy birthday, Chip, and thank you and Monarch Watch for your very important work in collaborations with us and many other groups. The Missouri Prairie Foundation is committed to continue acquiring original prairie and to connect and expand prairie habitat wherever possible. This work is of utmost importance to sustain prairie and native grassland habitat for rare plants, grassland birds, monarchs, and thousands of other species. We remain dedicated to assertive management of all the prairies we've owned for many years and all of the new ones we acquire. Each of these prairies is like a museum or library of priceless collections of books or art. Each one must be curated, and for prairie, which is even more precious than human-made artifacts, curation means assertive management, including prescribed burning and control of invasive plants. Missouri Prairie Foundation Director of Prairie Management, Jared Hubner, who was honored with the Wildlife Conservationist of the Year Award by the Conservation Federation of Missouri in early March 2020, has a special message about this prairie curation work, which we will share with you now.
Hi, I'm Jared Hubner, Director of Prairie Management for the Missouri Prairie Foundation. I'm on Linden's Prairie today, one of 23 properties open for public enjoyment. These prairies host an incredible diversity of flora and fauna, like this royal catchfly that's only found on remnant ecosystems. Maintaining this diversity takes active management. MPF conducts prescribed burning and invasive species treatment as part of this management. MPF also hires experts to conduct flora and fauna surveys to assess its management practices. Thanks to our generous supporters, we've been able to protect prairie gems like this one and continue to acquire other prairies across the state of Missouri, as well as complete reconstructions on portions of those properties. So thank you to all of our generous supporters.
Jared makes it look easy, but prairie management is hard work, and we thank Jared and all supporters for making this work possible. In addition to stewarding our own properties, we also help protect land owned by partners by providing management services to them. These include the Nature Conservancy, the Missouri Department of Conservation, the Ozark Land Trust, and the Marker Prairie. Prairie protection takes other forms as well. In addition to our land acquisition and on-the-ground prairie management, we also help protect prairie and other natural resources through advocacy, such as by testifying at hearings about proposed legislation affecting conservation in the Missouri State Capitol and signing on to a national letter of support for the Great American Outdoors Act, which passed into law earlier this summer. We are also a signatory to the letter supporting the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which passed the House this year and is awaiting passage by the Senate. Prairie protection is impossible without providing citizens information about its importance. Our educational activities include the publication of the Missouri Prairie Journal in print since 1979, in which we share articles on prairie ecology, native pastures, native landscaping, and related topics. We also maintain extensive information on our completely new Missouri Prairie Foundation website. You will find expanded information and photographs about each of our prairies, including the Polson-Les Bluff Prairie. Thanks to a donation of land from Jim Polson and his sister Judy Polson of New York in late 2019, the Missouri Prairie Foundation now owns a rare Luss Hill Prairie remnant in extreme northwestern Missouri, which we hope to dedicate publicly in 2021. So watch for more information about that. You can see more photos from Polson-Les Bluff Prairie on this webpage and on all of the other prairie pages under Where We Work on the webpage. We have also have a completely new Grow Native website with lots of new content. We have an active presence on our social media channels where we share prairie and native plant educational content. This year, after early March, we shifted from our planned in-person programs to virtual ones. Our 12 free webinars on prairie, native landscaping, and related topics were attended by more than 2,000 people this spring and summer, and recordings of the webinars are available on our YouTube channel. And we have more planned for this fall. Now, I'd like to announce our first door prize winner of the evening, a $100 Bass Pro Shops gift card goes to Imani Mehta. Congratulations, Imani. Please send Felicia a message in the chat and we'll put your gift card in the postal mail to you. We'll have 2 more drawings later in the evening. This year, we are recognizing the 20th anniversary of our Grow Native program, the goals of which are to increase the demand for and supply of native plant products and services in the lower Midwest so that more landscapes are improved with appropriate native plants to benefit water quality, wildlife, pollinators, and people. We connect consumers to our more than 150 Grow Native professional members through marketing efforts. We organize native plant pre-ordered sales in the spring and we'll have 3 more in September with Grow Native professional members offering plants for sale by pre-order. You can find details about the plant sales on our websites, and Felicia will share a link in the chat as well. Now, Brooke will share a message from Dr. Doug Tallamy, an entomologist in Delaware who has heightened awareness of the importance of native plants as the foundation of nature's web of life through his research, his lectures, and his books, the most recent of which is Nature's Best Hope.
Hello, I'm Doug Tallamy. I'm an entomologist and a professor at the University of Delaware, where I've been studying biodiversity for more than 40 years. I've been concerned about conservation my entire life, but it wasn't until I started talking to the public about my concerns that I realized there were lots of other people concerned as well. And they have been for decades. The Missouri Prairie Foundation is a perfect example. Missouri Prairie Foundation is a wonderful nonprofit. It's been preserving and restoring prairie ecosystems for more than 50 years. You know, less than 1% of the original prairie ecosystem is left, which makes restoring prairie ecosystems something we need to do whenever possible, wherever possible. But protecting the virgin prairies that are left is even more important. This is where the original prairie plant communities with all of their species intact still exist. This is the source of the seeds for our prairie restoration efforts, and this is where the animals that depend entirely on prairies are making their last stand. And this is why the conservation efforts of the Missouri Prairie Foundation are so critically important. And don't forget the Missouri Prairie Foundation's Grow Native program. It's now 20 years old, and it's been enormously successful in educating the public about the importance of native plants and in stimulating the growth of the native plant industry itself. So thank you for your interest in protecting our remaining prairie fragments, for choosing native plants for your own home landscapes, and for your support of the Missouri Prairie Foundation and its Grow Native program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Talamy, for your tireless work to promote native plants and inspire Americans to plant them to support wildlife. As Dr. Talamy stated, it's very important to establish native plantings wherever possible, and to do that, we must save original habitats because they are the seed sources for the native plant industry and for many other reasons as well. Someone in Missouri whose photography has helped raise awareness of prairie conservation and Dr. Talamy's message is wildlife photographer Napadol Palathong. Napadol is known throughout the country for his award-winning photography of sage grouse, prairie chickens, and other grassland animals, and he's also producing wonderful photographs of insects close to home. Joining us now, live from his home in Columbia, Missouri, is Napadol.
Hi everyone, I hope you're doing good. Tonight, Carol asked me to talk about my work, and interestingly, I have been photographing wildlife for many years, but this photograph I want to share with you is one of my first encounter with prairie in early 2000, I believe in 2001. At the time, I didn't know anything about prairie, and this photograph kind of drew me into it, the wide open space and the beautiful biodiversity of tall grass prairie, which is very important mission of Missouri Prairie Foundation. And every time I look at this photograph, I think the moment that I took this photo because it captured the light and the essence of the tall grass prairie. And the next slide is this photograph also the reason why I fell in love with prairie too, because of prairie chicken. At the time, my editor assigned me to go photograph prairie chicken. Interestingly enough, I photographed wildlife for many, many years before that, even before I came to work for the Department of Conservation. I didn't know anything about prairie chicken. I thought it was a chicken that lived on a prairie. And this photograph was one of really early photographs of prairie chicken that I took at Golden Prairie. My friend Lo kind of introduced me to prairie chicken, and I fell in love ever since I photographed them back in 2002. And I've still photographed them even this year, and it's so fun to photograph. And the next slide is to show you another photograph of Golden Prairie. This is also one of my favorite photographs of there in the evening. Actually, it was kind of interesting because this bird would come to the lake to do the dance. And there's another photograph that made me realize the importance of prairie because of this bird and the tall grass prairie made me realize that we need to preserve this habitat. And because of that, I get involved with prairie chicken and prairie. I also get involved with the monarch butterfly. That's another project I've been working on for several years now. 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I didn't know a lot about it. And because of monarch butterfly, I get involved with native plants, and I start to involve my neighbor and also park around my house to plant a lot of native grass. And that's kind of one of important project because, as you know, monarch need milkweed, right? And they also need a lot of different pollinator flower to help them survive. And so I started to document the life cycle of monarch to kind of show people to raise awareness of monarch butterfly. And in the next slide, you will see this interesting, I photographed this last summer. You can see the male actually try to court a female, and he actually grabbed her in the mid-air. And this is kind of the moment. Every time I look at this photograph, think about the interaction between wildlife, and it was shot in my own backyard, interestingly. So in a way, I kind of start bring nature to my backyard, and it's very interesting that you can create a biodiversity just in your own backyard. And as the next photograph to show you is the caterpillar. That's one of my favorite photographs to a monarch emerge from the egg. You can see tiny, tiny little egg that just look like a dance of joy that he emerged from the egg. And the next photograph is also to show you, this was just photographed very, very recently to a monarch caterpillar feeding on milkweed. So this is kind of also to say that how important it is to support the MPF mission and as well as native plant garden. Let's go both ways. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great evening, and thank you for having me.
Oh, Napadal, thank you so much for being here and sharing these exquisite photographs that each tell a story. Thank you. You are a treasure, and you've got lots of fan mail here in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And looking at Napadal's photos really drives home how important the Missouri Prairie Foundation's work is. We all agree on the many reasons why we should save prairie and promote native plants. We know that original prairie is one of the most complex and biologically diverse ecosystems on the planet, and we have it right here. We know that original prairie can never be recreated in its entirety, and we know that the plants, animals, and soils of our prairies and other native habitats hold the keys to improving our developed landscapes with native plants that will provide many benefits to people and to wildlife. We must save prairie and promote native plants for the future, and with your support, we are and will continue to do so for many years to come. There are many people who feel the same way as we do and work hard toward these goals. The Missouri Prairie Foundation has a tradition of recognizing excellence in prairie conservation in the form of several awards, which I will announce now to very worthy individuals nominated by their peers and selected by a Missouri Prairie Foundation committee of board members. The first award is the 2020 Donald M. Christensen Prairie Volunteer of the Year Award. It goes to Scott Lenharth of Nevada, Missouri. Scott is an ardent supporter of prairies and has been a dedicated volunteer to the Missouri Prairie Foundation and the Missouri Department of Conservation for many years. He spends hundreds of hours every year treating invasive plants and encroaching trees on Missouri Prairie Foundation and other prairies, collecting seed and propagating plugs for planting on our prairie reconstructions. He handles the administration of most of the Missouri Prairie Foundation's federal cost share programs, and for several years, and especially over the past year, has spent countless hours scanning and organizing boxes of Missouri Prairie Foundation historic documents. Scott prefers to keep a low profile and completes much prairie management and archival work behind the scenes by himself. He is always willing to help when available and is a valued team member of prescribed burns and other management activities. He takes it upon himself to complete many unglamorous tasks, like removing fencing at our Pleasant Run Creek Prairie and taking care to recycle all fencing and other material whenever possible. Congratulations, Scott, and many thanks and much appreciation for your tremendous contributions to the Missouri Prairie Foundation and to prairie conservation. The 2020 Claire M. Kuchera Prairie Volunteers of the Year Award goes to Michelle Murphy and Bob Rosenow of Attica, Michigan. Michelle and Bob live in Michigan, but own the 300-acre Hawthorne Point Farm near Sikeston in southeastern Missouri. This land has been in their family for many decades. Michelle and Bob have worked with the Missouri Department of Conservation for more than 6 years to conserve and restore 135 acres of sand prairie habitat on this property and have made it available for research. This site is one of only 2 known remnant sand prairies in New Madrid County, and sand prairie is the rarest prairie community type in the state. Congratulations, Michelle and Bob, and thank you for recognizing and protecting the special prairie features of your land. The 2020 William A. David Prairie Communicator of the Year Award goes to Andy Ostmeyer of Joplin, Missouri. Andy began his career as a staff writer with the Joplin Globe in 1984 after graduating from Kansas State University. During his 36-year career with the paper, he went on to serve in various positions and is today the editor, overseeing newsroom staff and responsible for the paper's content. 6 years ago, the Joplin Globe relaunched its outdoor page, which was a project of Andy's, and he regularly writes columns and stories for that section. In his work, Andy has highlighted prairies of southwestern Missouri, as well as the work of the Missouri Prairie Foundation and other prairie owners many times. covering land acquisitions, community events, prairie education, and more. Andy's interest in and dedication to sharing conservation issues with the greater Joplin community contributes to a citizenry informed about the importance of natural resource conservation in the region, and specifically prairie protection work. Andy always makes time to learn about prairie news and takes care to ensure the accuracy of what he prints. Congratulations, Andy. Your work is very much appreciated and very respected. The 2020 Bill T. Crawford Prairie Professional of the Year Award goes to Chris Newbold of Boonville, Missouri. Chris has worked for 21 years for the Missouri Department of Conservation in a number of capacities, including his current role as a natural history biologist in the department's central region. Chris has been instrumental in the reconstruction of hundreds of acres of prairie habitat at the department's Prairie Fort Conservation Area and other sites. This work has included creating a native seed collection program, establishing diverse prairie plantings, and years of stewardship of these reconstructions. Chris was the lead author of an article published last fall in the journal Restoration Ecology that documents the success of different prairie planting techniques. And it also notes that even in diverse prairie plantings, the composition and diversity still did not completely emulate a nearby reference remnant prairie. In the last few years, Chris has taken the initiative to organize intensive regal fritillary butterfly surveys on prairies owned by the Missouri Department of Conservation, the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and private landowners' prairies, and has painstakingly compiled data that compare regal fritillary counts with prairie management. This is important work for the survival of this prairie-dependent species. Congratulations, Chris. We greatly appreciate and admire your professional contributions to the cause of prairie conservation. In addition to our Missouri Prairie Foundation Awards, at this time, I would like to announce 3 Grow Native Program awardees in 2 award categories. These awardees were nominated by their peers and selected by a group of Grow Native committee members. Our Grow Native Native Plant Pioneer Award recognizes individuals whose past work has been foundational to the advancement of the native plant industry and movement. The 2020 Grow Native Native Plant Pioneer Award goes to Mitch Leachman of St. Louis. Mitch is the Director of Programs for the St. Louis Audubon Society. Since 2012, Mitch has delivered more than 150 presentations and seminars to over 5,000 people on native plant landscaping and gardening for birds. In 2016, he helped develop a series of native landscaping continuing education classes at St. Louis Community College at Merrimack. Mitch spearheads the very successful Partners for Native Landscaping workshop and has coordinated the St. Louis Native Plant Garden Tour. Mitch coordinates the St. Louis Audubon's Bring Conservation Home program, which involves many volunteers and provides on-site advice to homeowners in the greater St. Louis area for the restoration of native plant and animal habitat on their properties. Through this program, Mitch has advised landowners on landscaping with environmentally healthy and sustainable native plants, the removal of invasive plants, water conservation, and other stewardship practices that promote healthy habitat for birds, other native wildlife, and people. Congratulations, Mitch, and thank you for all of your work to promote native plants. This year, in recognition of the 20th anniversary of our Grow Native program, we developed a new award category called the Native Plant Protector Award. This award recognizes outstanding contributions to protect native plants in original habitats through enforcement, stewardship, advocacy, or education. We have 2 awardees this year. The first is the Missouri Native Plant Society. This 41-year-old conservation organization has worked on a purely volunteer basis to educate Missourians on the many values of the state's native flora. The Missouri Native Plant Society was founded in 1979 and is devoted to the enjoyment, preservation, conservation, restoration, and study of the flora native to Missouri. The Society is active both at the state level and regionally with chapter affiliates, which organize presentations on native plants that are free and open to all. At both the state and chapter levels, the Society organizes many field trips around the state, and it is on these trips that participants really learn how and where plants grow in specific habitats. The Society has organized trips in partnership with native plant societies of neighboring states, which is important because plants don't recognize state lines. The Society publishes a scientific publication called Missouriensis to document and share native plant knowledge in Missouri, and its Facebook group has more than 28,000 members. The Society's dedication to educating Missourians about the state's flora is key to native plant protection. Congratulations. We recognize and thank the Missouri Native Plant Society for its very important work. The second Native Plant Protector Award for 2020 goes to Corporal Brad Hadley of Birch Tree, Missouri, who was a Missouri Department of Conservation agent. Among Brad's many duties is enforcing Missouri's wildlife code to protect Missouri's fish, game, and other wildlife resources. This work includes the conservation of wild ginseng, coordinating with other state programs and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and tracking down fraudulent activity related to the ginseng trade. These efforts, along with his perseverance and insight, have been essential in developing and gaining support for revising ginseng harvest regulations to increase protection of this plant. For more than 10 years, Brad has served as an instructor for the annual Agent Training Academy related to ginseng and other native plants that may be exploited. In addition to his exemplary work with wild ginseng, Brad is interested in many rare plants in the Ozarks and engages in habitat management, public outreach, and is actively contributing to the control of feral hogs, which are a current major threat to native plants. Brad's efforts are making a tremendous difference to the protection of habitat that supports wild ginseng and many other native plants. Congratulations, Brad, and thank you for your outstanding work. I'd like to recognize and thank Missouri Prairie Foundation board member Jan Sassman, who is framing beautiful awards for our 2020 awardees, and we'll get them to our awardees as soon as we can. I'd also like to note that we have another Grow Native award called our Ambassador Award that we will present in our Grow Native Professional Member virtual conference on November 4th, which this year will be free to all professional members and all MPF members. So stay tuned for more details about that. And now I'd like to announce our second door prize for this evening. This is another $100 gift card from Bass Pro Shops. Felicia has used a name generator, and the winner is Bob Seymour. Congratulations, Bob. Please send a message to Felicia in the chat. The work of our 2020 awardees, as you heard, is diverse. Each awardee is making contributions to prairie conservation and the promotion of native plants in different ways. There are many ways you can be involved in our work as well. You can make a donation, volunteer, and share our e-news and social media posts with others whom you think would be interested in our mission. You can become a prairie advocate, and you can visit our prairies at any time. You're always welcome. Before we leave you this evening, we'd like to present a brand new 6-minute video illustrating our work produced by the documentary group. And after the video, I'll announce our final door prize winner.
I think it's important not to underestimate how having beautiful places, beautiful, open, undisturbed places are for the human spirit. I mean, we can take a look around this prairie and it's impossible not to be impressed and really almost overwhelmed by how beautiful it is.
Do you like beetles? See it? I did name my daughter after this prairie. It's probably the prettiest prairie that I think I've ever seen. I just love being out on this every day. There's really nothing better than being out in this prairie, you know, every day.
The Missouri Prairie Foundation is a 54-year-old organization, and it's mainly to protect prairies. We acquire original prairies and do manage those. Most of the western side of the state and a lot of the northern part of north of Missouri River was original prairie, but now it's only 1/10 of 1% of the original prairies left, and it's disappearing daily. That's one thing that we can say for the Missouri Prairie Foundation. We try to acquire as many of these as we can before they disappear, because they are a valuable habitat for a lot of plants and animals.
Each one of these prairies is just packed with incredible plant and animal life. And so it's really important to save each one of those acres because they're irreplaceable. We can and we should create prairie plantings. Those are incredibly important to have as much of our landscape as possible vegetated with plants that are native plants that are appropriate to that place. But we can never recreate any kind of original habitat in all of its ecological complexity. So we have to save these remnants because they're part of our natural heritage and they belong to all Missourians.
I love my job, yes. So basically I'm the field staff for the Prairie Foundation, and day-to-day activities, I'm out on the prairies most days and in the office occasionally. So everything from burning to invasive species control, woody shrub control. I do some flora and fauna surveys as well. I do grant writing, things like that in the office, but probably 75% is in the field.
Wow, this larkspur is gorgeous. Do you think it's responding to the burns?
I think so. I think it likes the fire, and I think it's really helping this prairie be more showy than what it would if you weren't burning as often.
Oh, nice. Look at the wine cups.
Oh, very nice.
Gorgeous. And I love how the stems are kind of bluish green.
Yeah.
Jared loves these prairies, and as our director of prairie management, he really embodies the spirit of the Prairie Foundation. This is an organization that's been around for well over 50 years. Its founders back in the mid-60s, its board members through all these decades, staff, volunteers, our financial supporters all share a really deep-rooted passion and commitment to protecting and managing these priceless landscapes for present and future Missourians to enjoy.
And I've always been interested in plants and animals, but also the natural communities, how they interact, things like that. And so prairies were very intriguing. And then their rarity, especially the fact that at one time they were so abundant, covering millions of acres. And now there's just a few tens of thousands of acres left. It just seems like when you have something like this that's so special, you shouldn't just let it totally disappear. And so I've always been very interested in trying to make sure that these kind of sites are around in perpetuity for people to visit and experience, and just so this part of our natural heritage doesn't disappear. I've been a member myself since I was in college, and so it's a membership organization, and yes, I would really appreciate people joining and helping us to support and protect these kinds of sites.
We would love for more people to join as members of our organization, and I think sometimes we think about the utility of landscapes, and there are many benefits, for water quality and carbon storage, but this beauty and this diversity is really important for us, for our spirits as well. So these prairies are a place to feel small. It helps you feel part of something bigger, and that's a wonderful feeling.
enjoyed the video and our first virtual annual dinner. We're grateful for your support and your interest in our mission. I want to particularly thank Brooke Woodmar for so masterfully orchestrating our program this evening, and for Felicia for her role as well. And many thanks to all of the board members, Bruce Schutte for his part in the video, David, our president, for his role in the video, Bruce for his wonderful photographs that we used in the program as well, and for the other photographers. To learn more about our work and our upcoming native plant sales and other events, please visit our website, moprairie.org. You can make a donation to the Susan Lordy Marker and Dennis Marker 2020 match at any time, and you can continue bidding on our silent auction items until noon tomorrow. If you have any questions for us now about the silent auction, please send a message in the chat. Watch for an email from Brooke with links that Felicia shared in the chat feature this evening. And if you have any questions about our work, you can respond to Brooke using the contact information she'll provide in the email. And now our final door prize winner is Chris Newbold, who is our Prairie Professional of the Year. Wonderful. Congratulations, Chris. Please send a message to Felicia in the chat. Good night, everyone, and thank you for spending your evening with us and for your support.